The sun bore down mercilessly on the cracked pavement of a quiet California suburb. 8-year-old Lily Harper sat behind a rickety wooden table, her small hands gripping a hand-painted sign that read, "Lemonade, 50 cents." Her blonde hair, now reduced to wisps beneath her pink baseball cap, framed a pale, determined face that seemed far older than her years. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a bird or the distant hum of a passing car. Lily's mother, Sarah, watched from the porch of their modest home, her heart heavy with a mixture of pride and worry. Lily's lemonade stand wasn't just a summer pastime, it was a lifeline. "Mom," Lily had said a week earlier, her big blue eyes shining with resolve, "if we can't afford all my treatments, I'll raise the money myself." Sarah had wanted to cry, but instead forced a smile, masking her anguish with encouragement. Now, sitting under the sweltering heat, Lily refused to let exhaustion claim her. Her slender frame, weakened by rounds of chemo, betrayed her determination. Every dollar she earned selling lemonade would go toward paying for her next round of treatment, a fact that burned in her mind as brightly as the midday sun. As the minutes crawled by, an occasional kind neighbor stopped by to purchase a cup, offering words of encouragement. Yet the total in her plastic jar was far from enough. Lily glanced at the nearly empty street and tightened her grip on the sign. She would not give up. Not today, not ever. Just as she wiped the sweat from her brow, a shadow fell over the table. She looked up, blinking against the sunlight. A tall, older man in a cowboy hat stood before her. His face was lined with years of experience, his eyes sharp but kind. For a moment, Lily thought she recognized him, but the thought faded as he crouched down, smiling gently. "How's the lemonade, kid?" he asked, his voice gravelly but warm. Before we get into today's story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. If you love stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Now, let's get started. The scent of lemons lingered in the thick summer air as Lily stared at the man before her. His voice had a weight to it, familiar, yet impossible to place. "Best lemonade in town," she replied, her voice trembling but hopeful. The street was eerily still, as if the world had paused for this moment. The occasional squeak of Lily's metal chair broke the silence as she shifted uncomfortably. Her body ached, a reminder of the battle raging within her, but she masked it with a determined smile. The small pitcher of lemonade on the table was nearly empty, condensation dripping onto the table's peeling paint. Her jar, though holding a few crumpled dollar bills and loose quarters, looked painfully inadequate for the monumental goal she had set for herself. Inside the house, Sarah peered through the window, her hands clasped tightly together. She had always been proud of Lily's spirit, but watching her daughter fight so fiercely against an enemy she didn't deserve to face tore at her soul. Each coin dropped into that jar felt like a reminder of how far they still had to go. Lily's thoughts, however, were focused elsewhere. Who is this man? She wondered, watching as he adjusted the brim of his hat. His weathered face and gentle demeanor exuded a quiet strength that intrigued her. His presence felt different from the neighbors who had stopped by out of sympathy or obligation. This man didn't pity her. He was curious, almost amused. "Why are you selling lemonade, sweetheart?" he asked, leaning on the edge of the table. His question was simple, but it carried a weight that hung in the air. Lily hesitated for a moment, clutching the jar instinctively. Then, looking him square in the eye, she said, "I'm raising money for my chemo. I don't have time to wait for miracles." The man's expression shifted slightly. His smile faded, replaced by something deeper. But before he could respond, another car pulled up to the curb, and Lily's focus was drawn away. The moment felt suspended, like a calm before a storm, and Lily had no idea just how much her life was about to change. The car door slammed shut, breaking the quiet rhythm of the afternoon. A middle-aged woman in a tailored suit stepped out, her high heels clicking sharply against the pavement as she approached the lemonade stand. Her eyes darted from Lily to the man, and then to the modest sign painted in shaky, colorful letters. "Chemo," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else before turning to Lily. "Sweetheart, how much have you raised so far?" Lily hesitated, glancing at the jar. "Not enough," she said softly, her fingers brushing the rim as if to protect it. The woman pursed her lips, her expression unreadable. "I'll take a cup," she said briskly, pulling out her wallet. She dropped a crisp $20 bill onto the table without asking for change and walked away, her heels clicking just as sharply as when she arrived. Lily stared after her, unsure if the interaction was an act of kindness or something else entirely. The man in the cowboy hat chuckled, a low, warm sound that softened the tension. "You've got quite the business going here, kid," he said, picking up a paper cup. He poured himself some lemonade from the pitcher and took a long sip, his eyes never leaving hers. "But you know, sometimes the right kind of help shows up when you least expect it." Lily tilted her head, puzzled. "What do you mean?" she asked, her curiosity sparked by the strange intensity in his voice. Before he could answer, another car pulled up, this one sleek and black, its tinted windows glinting in the sunlight. Lily's heart raced as the door opened and out stepped a man in a suit, his presence commanding immediate attention. He walked toward the lemonade stand with purpose, his phone pressed to his ear. "Lily Harper?" he asked, lowering the phone as his piercing gaze met hers. She froze, clutching the sign in her lap. Yes? "I need to talk to your mother," he said firmly. "Now." The cowboy stood, his calm demeanor hardening slightly as he stepped closer to Lily. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice steady but with an edge that wasn't there before. The man in the suit ignored him, glancing toward the house. "It's about her medical bills," he said flatly, pulling out a folder. "I'm here on behalf of the hospital." Lily felt the world tilt beneath her as the words sank in. The little jar of coins and bills suddenly felt like a cruel joke against the impossible mountain they were trying to climb. The cowboy's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as he looked back at the man in the suit. "You came all the way here for that?" the cowboy asked, his tone sharper now. The man in the suit opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Lily's voice rang out, clear and defiant. "We're not giving up. I'll sell lemonade every day if I have to." The cowboy glanced down at her, and a faint smile returned to his face. "That's the spirit, kid," he said. But in his eyes, something had shifted, something that told Lily the stranger wasn't going to let this end here. And as the suited man turned toward the house, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was about to set something much bigger into motion. Lily gripped the edge of the table as the man in the suit marched toward her house, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel driveway. The cowboy remained by her side, his weathered hands resting casually on his hips, but there was nothing casual about the way his eyes followed the man. "What's his deal?" Lily asked, her voice a whisper. "Debt collectors have a habit of showing up when families are at their weakest," the cowboy replied, his tone low but sharp. He glanced at Lily and added, "But don't you worry, kid. Some battles aren't meant to be fought alone." Inside the house, Sarah had already opened the door, her face pale as the man handed her the folder. Lily couldn't hear the conversation, but she didn't need to. The way her mother's shoulders slumped, the way she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, it said everything. The man gestured to the papers, his voice growing louder, cutting through the thick summer air. "Your daughter's account is overdue by months," he said, his tone cold and clipped. "If we don't receive payment soon, her treatments will be suspended." Sarah stammered, Please, we're doing everything we can. She's just a little girl." "Rules are rules, ma'am," the man interrupted, shoving the folder toward her. "I suggest you figure something out. Fast." Lily felt her chest tighten as she watched her mother's tears fall. She wanted to run inside, to tell the man that he was wrong, that she was figuring it out, one cup of lemonade at a time, but her legs felt rooted to the ground. "It's not fair," she muttered, her voice cracking. The cowboy knelt beside her, his deep voice steady. "Life rarely is, kid, but sometimes all it takes is the right person to tip the scales." Lily frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the table. "You'll see," he said, a mysterious smile playing at the corners of his lips. Minutes later, the man in the suit stormed back toward his car, muttering under his breath. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with tears. "I'm so sorry, baby," she said, her voice breaking as she walked toward Lily. "I failed you." "No, you haven't," Lily said, jumping to her feet. "We'll keep fighting, Mom. We'll figure it out." Her voice carried more conviction than she felt, but she refused to let her mother see her fear. The cowboy stepped forward then, clearing his throat. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat, "if you'll allow me, I'd like to help." Sarah looked at him, startled. I don't even know you." "You don't need to," he said, his tone calm but firm. "What matters is, I know the kind of strength it takes to do what you're doing, and I know when it's time to step in and lend a hand." Lily and Sarah exchanged a glance, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. But before they could respond, the cowboy reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He handed Lily a $100 bill, placing it carefully into her jar. "For the best lemonade I've ever had," he said with a wink. Tears welled in Lily's eyes as she stared at the money. I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "Don't worry about that, kid," he said, his voice warm. "Just keep believing, and maybe save me another cup for tomorrow." As the cowboy tipped his hat and began walking away, Sarah grabbed his arm. "Wait, why are you doing this? Who are you?" The cowboy turned, his smile deepening. "Let's just say I've been in a few tight spots myself," he said, "and I know how much a little kindness can change someone's life." But as he walked off into the distance, Lily's mind raced. She still didn't know who the man was, but something told her he wasn't done changing their lives just yet. The next day, the air was thick with tension. The lemonade stand was still set up, though Lily's energy felt drained. She had been sitting there for hours, watching the few passing cars with hopeful eyes, but no one had stopped. The jar in front of her was almost untouched. Lily's mind wandered to the conversation she had overheard the night before. Sarah was on the phone with a hospital administrator pleading for more time. "Please," she had begged, "just one more chance. We'll find a way." But Lily could see the fear in her mother's eyes, the weight of hopelessness sinking deep. She was about to pack up when the sound of footsteps approached. At first, she thought it was just another passerby, but the familiar shadow fell over her before she could look up. The cowboy. But something was different this time. His face, once warm and friendly, now held an unreadable expression. Lily's heart skipped a beat. He looked urgent. "Lily," he said, his voice low but steady, "we need to talk." Before she could respond, the sound of a car door slamming startled her. The same suited man from the day before appeared in front of her house, his face tight with frustration. He walked straight toward the cowboy, ignoring Lily entirely. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" the suited man barked, his voice sharp, but the cowboy didn't flinch. "You," the cowboy said, turning to face him with a calmness that seemed to cut through the tension like a knife. "You don't scare me, and you sure as hell won't intimidate this little girl either." The suited man sneered, taking a step closer. "You think you can just show up here and fix everything? You've got no idea what you're dealing with." Lily's heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears as the two men stood inches apart. But then, something unexpected happened. The cowboy reached into his pocket and pulled out a document. A large, official-looking envelope. He held it up for the man in the suit to see. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with," the cowboy said, his voice unwavering. "And I've been dealing with this for a long time." Lily's eyes widened as the man in the suit froze, his face draining of color. He took a step back, his eyes darting to the envelope as if it were a weapon. The cowboy smiled, his teeth flashing in the sunlight. "I think you might want to take a look at that before you make any more threats," the cowboy said, his voice low and deadly. The suited man hesitated, his hands shaking slightly as he took the envelope. He opened it slowly, pulling out the contents. As he read, his eyes narrowed, confusion creeping across his face. This is impossible." Lily watched in stunned silence as the man's entire demeanor shifted. His authoritative stance faltered, his hands dropping to his sides. The cowboy stepped back, his gaze steady as he spoke. "The problem isn't Lily or her family," he said quietly. "It's you, and I've made sure you'll never threaten anyone again." The suited man swallowed, his face flushed with panic. Who are you?" The cowboy didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Lily with a knowing smile, as if something huge had shifted in the air between them. But before the suited man could react further, he turned and began walking away. Lily could hardly believe what had just happened. Who was this man? What was in that envelope? Why had he come into their lives? But before she could even ask, the cowboy was gone. And in his place, something else had changed. The air felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. But the biggest shock came when Lily turned back toward her mother, whose eyes were wide with disbelief. I just got a call," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "The hospital. They're covering the rest of your treatment." Lily blinked, her heart leaping. "What? How?" "I don't know," Sarah whispered, shaking her head in awe. "But it's done." Lily's world tilted again, and this time, it felt like everything was about to change. The days that followed felt like a dream to Lily, one she wasn't sure she had the courage to wake up from. The hospital had called back to confirm the treatment was fully covered. The overwhelming weight that had crushed her chest for so long seemed to lift. But the sense of wonderment was tinged with confusion. How could this have happened? As the initial shock wore off, Lily found herself at the lemonade stand again, though it didn't feel the same. She poured cup after cup, but the joy that should have come with her victory felt hollow. She kept staring at the jar, now full of bills and change, each coin a reminder of how hard she had fought to get here, and how the fight had unexpectedly shifted. Her thoughts kept returning to the cowboy, the man who had vanished as quickly as he had appeared. His cryptic words echoed in her mind. Sometimes, all it takes is the right person to tip the scales. She wondered if she had missed something important about him. Who was he really? Why had he chosen this moment to step into her life? Then there was the suited man, the man who had come with threats and demand, the man who had left the envelope behind in stunned silence. What had been in it? It seemed as though his world had turned upside down with a single piece of paper. Lily couldn't shake the image of him, his panic, his realization that his power had slipped away. Was the cowboy behind it all? Had he truly fixed everything with a simple envelope? Sarah had been quieter these days, her own exhaustion etched into the lines of her face. But there was something in her eyes now, a flicker of hope that hadn't been there before. She caught Lily staring into the distance one morning, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled softly. "You did it, sweetheart," she said, her voice full of pride and wonder. "You saved us." But Lily wasn't so sure. It didn't feel like she had done anything alone. Every time she thought about the cowboy, about the sudden miracle that had happened, doubt crept in. She couldn't explain it, and part of her didn't want to. But part of her knew that the real lesson wasn't just about raising money. It was about something bigger, the unseen forces at play when you refuse to give up. That night, Lily sat on the porch with her mother, the sky a deep indigo above them. They talked about the future, about the things that were still to come, and for the first time in a long time, Lily allowed herself to believe it. Everything was going to be okay. But just as she was beginning to relax into the warmth of hope, the familiar sound of footsteps reached her ears. This time, it wasn't the suited man. It was someone else, someone she hadn't expected. Lily turned her head sharply, her heart skipping as the cowboy appeared in the fading light, his figure outlined against the horizon. This time, there was no mystery in his gaze, just quiet certainty. "I knew you'd figure it out, kid," he said, his voice low and steady. "I just needed to give you the push you needed." Lily stood up, her pulse quickening. "But how?" she asked, her voice trembling. The cowboy tipped his hat, a sly grin playing at the corners of his mouth. "Sometimes, all it takes is a little push in the right direction. The rest is up to you." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Lily to reflect on the strange, life-changing events that had unfolded before her. One thing was certain. She would never forget the lessons she had learned, nor the mysterious stranger who had given her the courage to believe in herself, and in the miracles that sometimes appear when you least expect them. As the days turned into weeks, Lily's life slowly settled into a new rhythm, one that felt full of promise and possibility. The weight of uncertainty no longer pressed against her chest. She was still fighting, but it was different now. The lemonade stand wasn't just about raising money anymore. It had become a symbol, a testament to everything she had endured and learned. Era's health was improving, and Lily felt a surge of pride every time she looked at her mother, who no longer carried the burden of fear in her eyes. They had learned how to lean on each other, to trust that no matter how difficult things seemed, they would find a way through. But what had truly changed in Lily wasn't just the situation, it was her perspective. She had learned something invaluable through it all. The world didn't always make sense and life wasn't always fair, but sometimes help came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes all it took was one person, one stranger, to show you that there was more to the story than you could see. And Lily had come to understand that there was strength in not giving up, strength in continuing to fight, even when the odds seemed insurmountable, the courage to face the unknown, and the grace to accept that some things were beyond her control. She stood at her lemonade stand once more, but this time there was no fear in her heart, only hope. Only the belief that no matter how much the world tried to knock her down, she would rise. Lily smiled as she watched a familiar figure walk up the driveway. It was the cowboy, and this time his smile was even wider than before. He didn't say anything, just gave her a knowing nod. She didn't need to ask what had happened. She knew. The cowboy's quiet guidance had sparked something in her that could never be extinguished. In that moment, she understood. It wasn't just about surviving the storm. It was about learning how to dance in the rain. With that thought, Lily's heart swelled with a newfound sense of peace. She wasn't alone in this world, and she didn't have to face it all on her own. She had strength, she had love, and now she had hope. And as she turned to the horizon, her eyes filled with tears, she realized that no matter where life took her next, she would never stop believing in the impossible. Lily's story reminds us that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most unexpected victories. In the face of overwhelming odds, there's always room for hope, and the power of believing in the impossible can transform lives. Take a moment to reflect. What have you faced in your life that seemed too big to overcome? And how can you find strength even when it feels like the world is against you? If Lily's journey touched your heart, share this story with others. Leave a comment below to let us know how you found hope in your own struggles. And remember, sometimes all it takes is a small act of kindness or a stranger's unexpected help to change everything.